Around 48, Thursday mostly sunny.
The views expressed on this program are those of the host, guest, and callers and are not necessarily those of KKNW, its management, or other advertisers. This is Alternative Talk 1150.
Welcome to Conversations Live with Vicki St. Clair. Talk radio to inspire, inform, and stimulate. Bringing you enlightened discussions with authors, creatives, innovative business and health professionals, and ordinary people living extraordinary lives, sharing their expertise and life stories, making a difference one word at a time. Now here's your host, Vicki St. Clair.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome. Well, today I'm bringing you a conversation I had with BAFTA-nominated screenwriter and author James Swallow. He joined me from London to share how he crafted a unique niche as a tie-in writer for shows like Star Trek, Stargate, and Discovery. And we'll take a sneak preview of his new thriller, Nomad. You'll also hear part 2 of the conversation I had with Joseph Olshan. He's the award-winning author of 10 novels, including Clara's Heart, which was made into a feature film starring Whoopi Goldberg. He taught creative writing at New York University, and James Olshan is now editorial director of Delphinium Books. His latest novel is Black Diamond Fall. Now, part 1 of our conversation aired on the live show September 29th, and you can catch that on podcast at conversationslive.net. Just go to the search box and type in Joseph Olshan or Black Diamond Fall, and it will pop straight up. You can listen to it there. And you can actually meet Joseph Olshan in person while he's up here in Seattle on book tour at University Bookstore in Seattle, October 18th, 6 p.m. That's University Bookstore in Seattle on October 18th at 6 p.m. So here's part 2 of our conversation, where we discuss what's going on in the publishing world, why he drove his latest book to market without an agent, and the big question, would he do it again? Now, part 2 of our conversation begins with Joseph Olshan describing a little bit more about the story of his book, Black Diamond Fall.
The jumping off point is, of course, the disappearance of this young man, but it turns out that his mother has been a docent at the Robert Frost farm. And so when the Robert Frost farm is vandalized, basically the day before his disappearance, his mother is called in to kind of look around and help them assess the damage. So as it turns out, because it's a small town, a small state and a small town, the detective who investigates the Robert Frost vandalism ends up being the detective who investigates this woman's son's disappearance. And so I bring the two events together in that way. But then, of course, there is some wonder and suspicion if somehow the people who vandalized the Robert Frost homestead had something to do with this young man's disappearance because of his family's connection to Robert Frost. So that is kind of the sort of driving force of the narrative, and through that I weave the story and the backstory of the relationship between the older man and the younger man who is the student who disappears, and how, because the older man cannot prove where he was, when the younger man disappears, actually comes under suspicion.
The book is described as a literary mystery. So what steps it up from just being a mystery?
By the way, I love these questions.
Oh, good.
So much, yeah. And it's an excellent question. And this is the difference. The writing, the quality of the writing is very important, and the level, the depth of the characterization. Those are the two components of what's called a literary novel. And so a good mystery writer may not spend time working on the language. They may just want a language that serves the plot. And a good mystery novel is a novel that is very plot heavy and plot focused. But this book is character focused and writing focused. So you have those two components that are competing with the mystery element, and I think that while the book does have a sort of suspenseful flow and it moves pretty quickly, I think its deepest chords are those struck by the relationships between the people and also the presence of the natural world as a character. I think you would agree that the descriptions of Vermont in the winter, that in and of itself, it becomes a character.
Right, definitely. Yes, you definitely get that atmosphere as a character, very much so. I'm talking with Joseph Olshan. He's the author of Black Diamond Fall. So my next question, Joseph, is as an award-winning author with 10 novels under your belt, and you've been very successful. Your very first novel, Clara's Heart, was made into a movie with Whoopi Goldberg, Neil Patrick Harris. Do you feel that you've changed how do you feel you've changed as a writer since that first novel? What have you learned along the way that now you know that you wished you'd known back then?
Well, I guess one of the things I've learned is how sometimes you need to underplay things. I think that first novel, although it was ambitious and I kind of overplayed the narrative in it. I had almost overly dramatic events, which, by the way, when the film portrayed them, really made them seem unbelievable. They were actually more believable in the novel because the two events I'm talking about were separated by several chapters. But in the movie, they were one right after another, and it just seemed completely unbelievable. But what that showed me was that I sort of overplayed my hand narratively. So since then, I've learned to write a narrative novel, but not but to rely on the drama doesn't necessarily have to be so forcefully constructed that it actually can be more subtle and still be very, very powerful. But that said, it's become, as much as I've learned, I've honed my craft over 10 books. Each book seems to become more and more difficult to write. Not quite sure why that is. Maybe I don't have the same sort of exuberance and energy as I did when I started out. But I find that I struggle more with later books.
I wonder how much of that do you think comes from like the mental pressure that you've got to be successful? Do you put that kind of pressure on yourself? Because I would imagine with having such success on your first novel, other people certainly have expectations around that for you.
Well, it's interesting because I guess when you say to me that you're successful, of course, there's a voice in my head that says, well, that's not really true. and I think that I've never believed that I was incredibly successful. I've always thought of myself as trying to get a larger readership, trying to get a larger audience. I mean, there are certain novelists who become extremely famous right off the bat, and I think that is a challenge because they can be duped into believing that whatever they do is going to be wonderful. And I feel that my entire career I've been struggling with my deficiencies and trying to sort of work with what I have. So I've never felt accomplished enough to be worried about pressure. Believe it or not.
And so in your mind, and this doesn't mean they are deficiencies, but in your mind, what do you think your deficiencies are?
I mean, I referred to it early in the interview. I feel that my landscape is limited, that I really can't write anything unless it's somewhat autobiographical.
Right.
And of course, writing the last two novels I've written have been sort of suspense stroke mystery stroke literary novels, and so that makes it even more difficult because you really have to kind of do a lot of work that the narrative dictates, and that doesn't often leave a lot of room for personal autobiography. So I've been trying to find ways to inject myself into these books so I can make them live. I mean, I feel that there are writers out there who can write about times and places where they haven't lived and yet somehow bring them to life. Mm-hmm. And I really can't do that. So that's an example of what I mean by deficiency.
Okay, sounds good. So you've said a lot of your work has been what they call gay fiction. I've heard you say that market is shrinking. we're looking more towards multi-culti. I'm guessing that's multicultural, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And Publishers Weekly said that your new novel rides the winds of cultural change. So do you think this book, Black Diamond Fall, is different to the other work you've done?
Yes, I mean, let me just give you I was doing a book reading in Middlebury the other night, and which is where the novel takes place. And then the bookstore owner said to me, she was very enthralled with the book, and she said, "You know, Joe, I'm not going to market this as gay fiction because I just don't think it really is. I mean, that is certainly one aspect of it, but you have a whole world that you're talking about here, which has nothing to do with that. And I think marketing it as gay fiction would be selling it short. And by the way, quite a few of my novels are quote unquote heterosexual novels. I mean, I've explored everything in my work." But yes, there have been several novels that were, in the realm of sort of talked about gay relationships and love between men. And yet, that said, I like to think that if I write sort of deeply and carefully about a relationship between two men, that it will be something that will be universal and that will appeal to all sorts of people, and that they will see the sexuality of these two men as incidental, but rather it's a love story. And in this case, I don't really think there have been a lot of love stories between much older and much younger people. I mean, heterosexual or gay. And so that's one of the subjects that really drew me and excited me, because I just haven't really seen a lot of novels that dealt with that. And also too, the books and the stories that I've heard about relationships between older people and younger people talk about how the older person feels revivified and younger by being with a younger person, but that's not my experience. It makes me feel older. I don't really get that, and I felt that point has not been articulated, and I certainly wanted to articulate it in this novel.
That's actually quite funny, because I was just speaking with a friend who is in what we call a May-December romance in England, and he said, God, she doesn't relate to anything that I know and I grew up with, because she's the younger partner in that case, and it was making him feel really old.
Well, I think that anybody who feels old in a situation like that is at least being realistic. Because they are older, and there are just things that they can't do that they could do when they were younger, and they look at the younger person and say, well, I could do all of this when I was younger, but there are just certain things that you can't do. Even as fit and vital as you want to keep, and I certainly consider myself a fit person, you just can't compete with somebody who's 37 or 38 years old.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I know that from personal experience.
So can we talk about publishing? Because I know you're an expert in this field, and it certainly has changed a lot over the last few years, and it continues to change. I read that you drove the publication of this book, Black Diamond Fall, yourself. You didn't have an agent, you just pursued it all yourself. And I'm wondering why you chose to do that, and just share some of the pitfalls and the benefits of doing that.
Well, actually, it wasn't by choice. I had a very unfortunate misunderstanding with my literary agent, and we had a very, very long relationship, and so I was agentless and wasn't making any connections with any new agents, or I did have other agent for a while, and that didn't work out. So at some point, I just said, look, I got to do this myself, and I knew that I would probably not be able to get the attention of big editors in publishing because I was agentless, despite the fact that I had a name and despite the fact that I run a publishing house. So I just decided to reach out to a few smaller publishers, and every single one of the small publishers I reached out to wanted to publish the book, and I decided to go with a publisher who, like me, is a novelist but also runs a publishing company, because I figured that we could probably have a lot to exchange and learn from one another, or certainly I could learn from him since he's been at it longer than I have, and so that's why I did it that way. But having gone through this experience, I would say that a writer is much better off having an agent, and I wish that I did have an agent in the process of selling this book. It would have made things a lot easier for me. So even though I'm a seasoned professional, and even though I can talk, numbers and publishing nuances with the person who's publishing me, I still think you need an agent, because there are certain things that happen that you just don't want to get involved in, and the agent really needs to pick up the slack. But getting an agent these days is almost as difficult as getting a publisher. I mean, agents will only take on books that they're sure they can sell. And I've seen this happen. An agent will really admire a novel, but not know how or to whom they can sell it, and they won't take it on, because it just becomes too much of a process and heartbreaking for everybody involved. So a lot of really good writers are having trouble finding agents, because what they're doing, the product they're going out with, is not something that's easily recognized as something that's saleable to a certain person. And also agents have their contacts at different publishing houses. So, for example, Agent A will sell a novel to Editor E at William Morrow and Company, and Editor E will only be interested in a certain kind of fiction. And there may be Editor C at William Morrow Company that Agent A doesn't know, and that the Editor C might be a better fit for the novel that Agent A is representing, but it won't go to Editor C because the agent doesn't have a relationship with Editor C. So that's how, I think it's a good example of how publishing has really changed.
Yeah.
It used to be that a really good novel that was well done could be published, and now it's not the case anymore. It has to be exactly what someone's looking for. It has to be something that the editor can market to the marketing department and the sales department, and so they have to be able to think of a strategy. So it's really love of a book. My publishing company publishes what we love. We're among the very, very few remaining publishing houses that do that. But most of the publishers out there, they have to love plus be able to sell the book to their constituents.
Right, right. And you publish a very small number of books a year, as do many publishers. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. They think they just have an endless budget to publish endless number of books. So that's another big change, I think, with a lot of the smaller houses too.
Yeah, well, it's actually it's quite expensive. It costs around, production costs and everything costs around $10,000, believe it or not, to publish a book in a quality way, with design costs and printing costs and all sorts of costs. So it's not an easy undertaking, and all our books are very high quality publication. I mean, materials that we use to design. I mean, we pride ourselves on that. So taking anyone on, of course, is an investment, and the advance is paid on top of the production costs. So it's difficult to make money in this business, really.
Right, right. Now, a lot of people have a day job, as they call it, and write at night. A lot of people do that because they find it works best. Some need the money, right? But some also find it works best for them because they can't handle the amount of solitude they'd get if they just sat and wrote all day. How does that work for you?
Well, unfortunately, I work out of my house, so I don't really get the chance to interact with people the way most people would at a publishing house. The only thing I can say is that I'm in contact with people all the time, and so virtually I'm in touch with people we're very closely associated with HarperCollins, and so I'm always in touch with my contacts there and the publisher for whom I work and my authors. So I have this world of people that I'm involved with, but it's all it's all virtual.
Mm. Well,
but that would be in comparison to sitting alone in a house and writing one book after another, where you're not really in contact with anyone unless when you go out and get the mail. So I feel that it's a lot busier life because of this publishing job, even though I don't see these people on a daily basis.
Yeah, I'm the same. I don't see people I work with. They work all over the world. But I did have one project where I just did it by myself, and I was nearly going nuts by the end of 10 weeks. I was like, so it's been such a pleasure talking with you, Joseph. A final thought you'd like to leave our listeners with today?
Well, I think that for me, examining my life really closely has produced my best work, and that's how I operate as a writer. It's different for other people, but I think that this book that I've just published is a very personal novel, despite the fact that it's based on real events. It goes to the core of me, and I wrote out of the deepest part of myself in order to complete it.
Well, we certainly appreciate you being with us today. The book is called Black Diamond Fall. My guest, Joseph Olshan. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're listening to Conversations Live with Vicki St. Clair. We hope you enjoyed this conversation with Joseph Olshan. Just a quick reminder, you can see Joseph Olshan in person at University Bookstore in Seattle. That's coming up on the 18th. That's Wednesday at 6 p.m. You want more information? Visit josepholshan.com. And that last name, Olshan, is spelled Olshan. So make sure you stay tuned to Conversations Live. When we come back, after this quick break, Vicki talks to James Swallow. He's an award-winning British writer and author of the new thriller series Nomad. Stay tuned.
Hi, this is Vicki St. Clair with Conversations Live, and it's that time of year again. It's the 2018 KKNW Listener Survey, and I have a big favor to ask of you because we want to improve programming on an ongoing basis. So could you please just go to 1150kknw.com and take a few moments of your time to fill out the survey. It really helps me as a host to hear what you like about our show and what kind of guests and topics you'd like to hear in the future. Same goes for KKNW. It helps KKNW provide better station programming. Now, to thank you for your time for filling out the survey, you'll also have a chance to win a round-trip passage on Victoria Clipper to Victoria, BC, plus a $100 gift certificate to Schwartz Brothers restaurants. So go to 1150kknw.com for your chance to win and tell us what you really think.
Parkinson's disease affects as many as 1 million people in the United States. At the Parkinson's Disease Foundation, it's our mission to beat this disease. To learn about the Parkinson's Disease Foundation, or if you want to help support our work, visit our website, pdf.org, or call us at 800-457-6676. In the Northwest, contact the Northwest Parkinson's Foundation at nwpf.org.
This is Martha Norwalk, every Sunday morning beginning at 9 a.m. Thanks in part to Anti-Icky Poo, the product that gets the stink out, we cover the world of animals. This week, October 14th, it's a harmonic energy shifting Sunday with Jude and Paul Ponton from the Whispering Dragon Center in Seattle in the studio. They'll have their acutonic forks and chimes, Tibetan bowls and bell, Pua Didge rattles ready to go to do remote treatments for you and or your animal friends on Martha Norwalk's Animal World, Sunday morning, 9 a.m. to noon, right here on Alternative Talk, AM 1150.
Radio is very competitive. Shows soar in popularity and then flame out. Sometimes, however, a real connection is made with an audience, and success blooms year after year. For over a decade, Conversations Live with Vicki St. Clair has built a loyal following thanks to inspiring and stimulating conversation. Longevity, loyalty, exclusivity. Smart advertisers seek it out. With Vicki's valuable audience, the search is over. Discover the affordable, effective ways to advertise your business. Log on to conversationslive.net. That's conversationslive.net today.
Are you ready for something real, raw, upfront, and honest? Then tune in each Wednesday at 2 p.m. right here for Love from the Hip. I am spiritual hypnotherapist, master esthetician, and the host, Sakura Sutter. This show is unlike anything you have ever heard and was created to help others to help themselves. Hear me follow up with guests I have hypnotized and see how it has improved their lives. I will also spotlight amazing people from around the world. There's skin tips, live readings, and answers to life's burning questions. Join us each Wednesday at 2 p.m.
Next week on Conversations Live with Vicki St. Clair. She's a correspondent on National Geographic's Explorer and Netflix's Bill Nye Saves the World. We're talking, of course, about Cara Santa Maria, and we'll discuss the science behind addiction, top travel trends, new explorations, and exciting new discoveries. Tune in Mondays at noon Pacific Time and catch up on over 600 podcasts at conversationslive.net.
Conversations Live with Vicki St. Clair. Listeners trust the show and advertisers love the audience. Learn more at conversationslive.net.
Make us part of your daily routine. Alternative Talk 1150.
And welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. You are listening to Conversations Live with Vicki St. Clair. And coming up next, James Swallow. His new book is described by Wilbur Smith as unputdownable, a must-read. I'm not sure unputdownable is a real word, but it's certainly a nice compliment. James Swallow is a British author and writer. He's a BAFTA nominee and Scribe Award winner. He's a 3 times New York Times bestseller, and his body of work includes fiction, television, radio, journalism, new media, and video games. One of his video games actually sold over 2 million copies. And today we'll hear about the first in his new Rubicon thriller series. It's called Nomad. James Swallow, welcome.
Well, thank you for having me on the show, Vicki. Great to be here.
Yeah, very pleased to have you here. And I'm just looking at the breadth and depth of your work, James. I mean, it includes novels, the Rubicon action thrillers, which is we're going to talk about in a little bit, the Sundowners steampunk Western novels. You've written stories from the worlds of Star Trek, Warhammer, 40,000, Doctor Who, Star Wars, 24, Stargate, 2000 AD. I mean, the list just goes on endlessly. And I heard you say, I can't afford to be a purist. I have a mortgage. So
I like to keep busy. What can I say?
Yeah, and I think a good writer can write across multiple platforms, multiple genres, and you obviously are proving that. So great to talk with you today. So curious about when you started writing, how you began your career. How did that happen for you?
Right at the very beginning, that's, well, I'm turning the clock back a while now. Originally, I started off as an entertainment journalist, so I was writing about film and television. I was interviewing people. I was writing reviews of movies and books and that kind of thing. And that was great fun, but it was kind of disposable. You know, I never felt like anything I wrote really had any kind of permanence to it. And as I was watching other people, you know, getting successful book deals and, you know, writing TV shows, I kept thinking to myself, you know, that's really the career that I would like to have. So from there, I just worked as hard as I could to make contacts within the industry. I came over to the U.S. and I pitched for a few TV shows over there. And eventually I got myself, just through, you know, sheer bloody-mindedness and kind of just putting my nose to the grindstone, got myself into a position where I could get in front of people who had the power to commission, and off I went. Yeah,
that's great. And you write a lot of what's called tie-in work. Would you explain what that is for those who don't know?
Well, essentially what a tie-in is it's a book that's based on an existing franchise. So, for example, some of the work that I've done, I've worked on the Star Trek TV shows. I've done tie-ins for Doctor Who and 24. What you'll get there is a story from that fictional world, but it will be an original story. So not an adaptation of a story you might already have seen on TV, but a brand new story with those characters, expanding their world and giving you kind of a different insight into who they are and what they do.
And so when I was reading some of your background and delving into some of the work that you've done, it seems that sometimes you have a pretty free range when you're writing that tie-in work, and other times you're given pretty strict criteria.
Yeah, I mean, it's not kind of a one-size-fits-all sort of thing. It depends on the licensor or the company that actually owns the franchise. Sometimes they'll give you a complete, you know, blank page, and they'll say, hey, go crazy, you know, do whatever you like. Other times it will be very, very strict, and every tiny little detail will have to be certified and signed off on somebody. You know, there'll be companies that have someone whose specific job is to do nothing else but to make sure that you dot every I and cross every T. But ideally, you know, if you're going to work in a franchise that already exists, you need to be knowledgeable about it to begin with, you know, so that you don't write something that feels tonally incorrect.
Right, so you don't write something for Star Trek if you've never watched it.
Absolutely, yeah.
Very competitive work, I would think, because I remember years ago when I was taking creative writing, nonfiction at school, I ran into several people who had written for Star Trek, and a lot more people who'd wanted to write, but of course didn't get a hit on that. So how do you how do you? Well, I think all fields are competitive, but for this particular field, how do you get past that competitiveness?
Well, you do need to have a very specific skill set to be a tie-in writer. You know, not only do you need to actually be able to write, you also need to have that understanding, as I said, about the texture and of the world and the characters. But there's also a degree of kind of workman-like ability that you need to have, because often these books have to be delivered to a very strict deadline, and then you have to go through a lot of hoops, and you have to go through a lot of approvals. So you have to be somebody who isn't precious about your work. You have to be a kind of person who can work in a team and take criticism and be willing to let your stuff be changed and moved around. You know, so you have to have all of those kind of abilities. And often people who who love those franchises will say, well, I'd love to write a story in that, but if they don't have experience in all those other things,
right,
it's very difficult for them to kind of step up and become one of those writers. So you need to develop that toolkit, that experience, I think, before you can really write anything in someone else's universe.
Right, right. So whether you're writing a novel or whether you're writing a script or a game or a piece for radio, it's all about storytelling. But how do you, for example, approach writing for a game differently than you would writing for, say, a novel?
Well, at the end of the day, you hit the point pretty much right there. It's all story. At the end of the day, it's all writing. And the way I approach it is I consider it, I'm using different tools in my tool set. So, if you're writing, say, a novel or, that's going to require a different set of writing tools than if you were writing a short story, you'd have to, conduct your story in a completely different way. When you're writing for a video game, that is, again, it's a completely different style of writing. Again, still writing, still a story, still has characters and plot and nuance and all those kind of things. But you have to deal with a completely different structure, because quite often with a video game, what you'll have is a branching narrative with multiple paths through the story where characters can change what they're doing. Because of course, in a book, you're kind of a passive participant in the story. You see through the eyes of the main character, but that character's story is kind of set in stone. But if you're playing a game, quite often you are the lead character in the story, and the choices that character makes are your choices, so the story can play out in different ways. And of course, as the writer of that story, you have to make sure that you facilitate that narrative, and you have all these different directions. So you find yourself writing, 20 or 30 different versions of a script based on 20 or 30 different options that character may have.
Right, right. Interesting. And do you find yourself, do you plot this out ahead of time, or are you what they call a pantster, writing by the seat of your pants? Do you go with the flow?
Well, for my novels, I'm a plot guy, and certainly for the Mark Dane books, which are action thriller stories tend to be strongly plot led. Even though you obviously have to have an iconic, strong character as well, but I've always felt a great thriller story is a hero reacting to a villain's plot. That's what you get in. You look at your typical James Bond movie, that's kind of the sort of thing you get there. So I always try to build a strong plot core, the spine of the novel, if you were, and then hang everything else off of that.
Right, right. Well, good segue into the novel. Let's talk about the novel Nomad. This is the first in a new series. It's also a new genre for you, I understand.
Yeah, I've been writing for quite a while, but most of the, as I was saying, a lot of tie-in stuff and a lot of science fiction stuff. But my other big love in terms of the books that I just enjoy and the genre that I really enjoy was action thrillers. And I'd reached a stage in my career where I was doing pretty well with the work I had, but I just felt like I don't want to plateau. I don't want to just keep doing the same thing. I want to stretch myself as a writer. I want to maybe do something that pushes me a little out of my comfort zone just to keep me interested. And thrillers was a thing that I really loved, so I thought, I'm going to just do this. And in many ways, my story is about a spy thriller hero who himself is pushed out of his comfort zone in the story when his team is ambushed and he finds himself he has to go on the run to clear his name. He's very much placed into a situation where he's doing stuff he doesn't want to do. He's pushed out of his comfort zone. So I think I was kind of channeling myself a little bit when I came up with the idea for this character.
Right, right. So it's about MI6, and I'm curious what kind of research you did for this, and how you made this MI6 character so believable.
Well, basically, I just had to dive in with both feet. There's there's a wealth of information out there. I tried to make sure that I spoke to people who were involved in that kind of world. I tried to get as authentic and kind of granular a level of detail as I possibly could. I tried to make sure that all of the technology that I research feels realistic and it feels truthful and authentic. And in terms of, all the locations where the story takes place, they were places that I'd visited myself, where I kind of walked a territory, or if they weren't places I could physically go to, I found people who had been there and just tried to get that level of detail to try and make it feel realistic. Because at the end of the day, it's a fast-paced action-adventure story, so you have to suspend your disbelief a little bit because of all the car chases and things blowing up. That's right. How action thrillers work. But in order to make the readers come along with that story, to suspend their disbelief and believe that it's realistic, I try to make sure that every other element is as truthful as I can possibly make it.
Right. Well, I am talking with James Swallow. His new book is called Nomad. It's the first in a new thriller series. We're going to take a very quick break. You're listening to Conversations Live with Vicki St. Clair. Please stay with us. We'll be right back.
Next week on Conversations Live with Vicki St. Clair. She's a correspondent on National Geographic's Explorer and Netflix's Bill Nye Saves the World. We're talking, of course, about Cara Santa Maria, and we'll discuss the science behind addiction, top travel trends, new explorations, and exciting new discoveries. Tune in Mondays at noon Pacific Time and catch up on over 600 podcasts at conversationslive.net.
Do you love wildlife? Then make a real difference by helping PAWS care for sick and injured wild animals. Volunteers help feed and clean the animals until they are well enough to return to the wild. Sign up today and help save a wild life. No experience necessary. All training is provided. Visit paws.org or call 425-787-2500.
Hi, I'm Kathy Cooper, and every Wednesday from 1 to 2 p.m., I'll be hosting Lost and Found. We'll be discussing all types of losses, but it's not going to be the doom and gloom hour. It'll be an hour of education, support, validation, and yes, we will have a little bit of humor. So won't you join me Wednesdays 1 to 2 p.m., Lost and Found, because every loss matters, and through every loss, something can be found.
Total Woman Health Studio in Tacoma celebrates 42 years in the fitness business. We specialize in personal training success for women of all fitness levels. We know the number one key to your workout success is consistency, and the solution to maintaining consistency is a Total Woman customized program. Imagine how you want to look and feel. Then come see how we're different. Call Total Woman 253-565-7546. Mention you heard this on Conversations Live and receive one free month of membership. Call right now, 253-565-7546.
Conversations Live with Vicki St. Clair. Ordinary people leading extraordinary lives. Advertise. Learn more at conversationslive.net.
Giving local voices a chance to shine. Alternative Talk 1150.
And welcome back, everyone. You're listening to Conversations Live with Vicki St. Clair. And my guest in this segment is James Swallow. He's a very prolific writer. He writes across multiple genres, radio, television. He writes scripts, he writes novels, you name it, he does it, and games, of course, too. And we're talking right now about his new novel called Nomad. It's the first in a new thriller series. And I want to just go a little bit into characterization and how you develop that, James, because to make a hero believable, he's got to have some flaws and yet still be likable. So talk to us a little bit about how you develop the character of Mark Dane.
Well, that's interesting because, when I was first thinking about writing myself an action thriller, I went back and I looked at all of the books that influenced me as a reader, and I was looking at the other books that were around in the market at the time, and I was thinking, well, what do these have in common? What kind of characters are we seeing in this sort of fiction? And what I found was, while there were a lot of great stories out of there, out there in the world, there were a lot of characters who felt very similar to me, is that they were all these kind of flawless action badasses, you know, these guys who would walk into a room and immediately be able to sort of take on 20 guys at once and, seduce the lady and then like jump out of a window and steal a car and whatever, and I never got a sense reading these stories that these guys were ever going to be in serious trouble because they were such tough guys. And as much fun as that is to read about a character like that, I started to think to myself, I'd rather read about somebody who's a little bit more flawed, a little bit more human, the kind of guy who you would see him in a situation like that and you think, well, maybe he won't make it through to the end. And I think that makes you empathize with that character a little bit more. It makes you feel like he's a little closer to you and I. So I modeled him more on, I often talk about Die Hard is one of my favorite action movies. I think that character in that movie ends up bloody but unbowed by the end of the story, but he still wins through. Same with Indiana Jones from the Raiders of the Lost Ark and those films is a character who is intelligent and adaptable, but he's not always the strongest guy in the room. And I think that makes you connect with them a lot more than perhaps somebody who is, this stoic kind of cider beef of a guy.
Right, right. So I know that you mentioned some of your favorite authors, which were Ian Fleming and Robert Ludlum and Tom Clancy. In fact, in the acknowledgements of the book, you give them a shout out and you say that they heavily influenced the writing of this book for you. So I'm wondering, what did you take from each of those authors and how did they influence you?
That's a great question. I mean, those are the authors who I kind of came up reading, So I think from Fleming, I think he had a very interesting eye, and which when you read his books, he's got this attention to detail that sometimes is a little overwhelming, but there's a kind of coyness to it and a kind of casual sort of way he kind of just tosses these details into the story. And I always like that, the sort of way, it's almost like a raconteur telling you the story. And I like the casualness of Fleming's writing. So I thought that's definitely something I've tried to emulate. In terms of Tom Clancy, definitely for him, authenticity is the thing. Every one of the best Clancy stories has that authentic texture to it, the reality of it, the sense of the redolence of the technology and the location. I think all of that comes through very strongly. And also he has a great ability to do these kind of mosaic narratives where you'll have other plot lines that are paralleling the main characters that will throw a stark light onto parts of the other parts of the story. I think that's a useful element to learn. And then for Robert Ludlum, he's the man, I think. He's the guy I kind of regard as like the top kick. I mean, with the stuff that he did, with the Jason Bourne series, and then his Covert One novels, and all of the other great books that he's written and the great stories that he's created. I think Ludlum had an unerring sense of how to tell this kind of fast-moving, propulsive action narrative. And that is, something that I try to seek to emulate in my writing.
Right. I actually remember reading Robert Ludlum, gosh, it was many, many, many years ago. And it kind of spoiled me for a little while for other authors because it was so fast-paced. I had to learn to chill out again. So let's talk about Lucy Keys. She is the person who is hopefully going to help Mark Dane get through his troubles and get things resolved. Was it hard for you, or how do you go into developing a female character?
Well, Lucy was an interesting character to create. She kind of spun out of an urban legend story that I'd heard, which was about the American Special Forces, Army Special Forces Division, Delta Force, which in the real world is an all-male organization. But there's this urban legend, which may or may not be true, that they had a secret division that was all female because there would be operations where perhaps a woman could get into a situation and solve a problem where perhaps a male special forces operator could not. Now, I don't have any secret insight here into the workings of Delta Force, and I don't know whether that's true or not. Perhaps somebody out there could email me and tell me. But I love the idea of that there would be an all-female unit to do these kind of jobs. And immediately I started to think, well, if you were somebody in that unit, what kind of person would you be? What kind of character would that foster and that would create. And I realized that I had the perfect foil here for Mark Dane, is for somebody who has this sort of hardcore action hero sort of motif. But writing that character as a woman immediately opens up a whole set of different ways to tell the story. So in a lot of ways, Lucy will sometimes take on what would be the more traditionally male role in the narrative, and Mark will take on the more traditionally female role. And I like to mess around with those tropes and those archetypes, flip them around a little bit, and I think it adds an interesting tension to some of the story.
Right, right. And talking of tension, I know you're a plot guy. You said you're a plot guy, but what drives the pace for you? Because if it's nonstop, which often critics or reviewers will say it's nonstop, but there has to be a little breathing space there. Otherwise, it gets too much. How do you pace that?
I've always thought of myself as a guy who can kind of see the music, right, when it comes to telling a narrative. I think one of my best abilities as a writer is that when I finish plotting a story, I can look at it and say, well, there's a lull here and there's a peak there, and I need this, I need a car chase or a dance number in the middle of this, right, to pep the story up and make it move at the right kind of pace. And that's a skill that I've just developed over a lot of years. I think some of it comes from my early experiences in writing for American television, which has this, the 5-act structure, and you very much learn from very early on how to build in a structure that has those peaks and troughs that will keep people interested and keep people glued to their TV set. And I try to do the same thing with my book. So every time I end a chapter, I want to make sure that I end it on a question or a kind of up note, so that people will want to come back the next day and read the next chapter of the book. People often say to me, I read your book in an entire evening. I read it from cover to cover. I stayed up until 4 a.m. to read your book because I wanted to keep on reading. And I'm always really, really happy to hear that, because that's exactly the kind of energy I want coming out of the novel.
Yeah, I saw somebody on Twitter who said he'd read one of your books. It was I think it was Storm, or maybe, I don't know. But he said he'd read it many, many, many times. So I thought, okay, you have quite a following out there.
That's so rewarding to hear that when people say to me that they've gone back to the book time and again, and they've got more out of it. As a writer, there's nothing better than hearing somebody say they got that much enjoyment out of your work.
Yeah. So let's talk about dialogue, because this is another thing that can make or break a book. If it's not realistic, it just drags that book down. How do you make that realistic? How do you keep it realistic?
Again, just research, really. I try to have an ear for that sort of thing. A lot of it is just listening to people and trying to find people who are, exemplars of that sort of character. I mean, Mark Dane himself, he's from South London. I'm from North London, so, not a million miles away from him. So there's a lot of kind of, I think, my personality kind of shows through from him. But I know a lot of people who are from that part of the world, so I can listen to the cadence and rhythm of their voices and lock onto that. The same with Lucy. Lucy is a New Yorker. I have a lot of friends who are from New York. And so, I'm always kind of hearing the echo of their voices whenever I'm writing dialogue for her.
Right. Well, the book is called Nomad. Is there a scene that is more difficult for you to write, a certain type of scene more difficult for you to write than other types of scenes?
Oh, that's a really good question. There's no particular type. Sometimes it'll just be a moment where, I'll have to work at it and come at it and construct it in different ways. I think sometimes kind of like the ending is always the hardest part for me. I think to find the right note to end a story on. As sometimes I find myself, I kind of end the story 3 or 4 times when I'm rewriting it, because every character has to kind of have a sign-off at the end of the story. And coming up with something that ties all those little plot elements together, but also kind of leaves a few doors open for the next story, that's kind of difficult to juggle all those balls all at once. But it's a fun challenge.
Yeah, I heard a quote the other day. A writer said there is no conclusion at the end of a book. It's just a good place to stop, ... for now.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I mean, I think, what you have to remember is when you're landing that story right at the very end, that's the last thing your reader's going to see before they close the cover and they walk away. And what you want them to do is you want them to have that emotional moment where they feel like they've had catharsis, where they feel like they've had closure, but not too much, because you want to want them to come back for the next novel that you write.
Yeah, I think there's nothing worse than reading a novel and it's been good all the way through, and then they just close it out quickly with a chapter of exposition, just telling you, what went on, and it's kind of, you're left flat there. So
That's sure, and everybody lived happily ever after.
yeah. So I know you're working on a series. Do you have this all plotted out? Is it evolving as it goes along?
It's a kind of some from column A and some from column B, really. Right now, I'm just finishing up book 4 in the series, and I have a story arc planned out for the first 6 novels, and then a few other ideas past that point. Obviously, it's all down to the readers. If people want me to keep telling stories with these characters, I will keep telling stories with them.
Right. And so, because you work in so many genres, you kind of spread your eggs around, if you will, rather than keeping all your eggs in one basket. But has the way that the publishing industry changed affected you and your career and the decisions you make?
Yeah, I think to a degree. I mean, seeing a lot of the changes that have happened, the rise in digital reading technology over the last few years has made new markets open up for us. I mean, one of the reasons I like writing different kinds of work, working in games or short fiction or what have you, I think that keeps me sharp. I think if I was writing the same kind of thing project after project after project, I might get a little bit bored with it. But if I go away and I try something different, I think when I come back, I find out that whatever experience I had, say, in writing video games brings a new light for me to shine on my writing for books, and it brings me a new set of tools that I can apply to it. And I think as the industries move forward, as these changes have sort of resonated out, it's only good for readers and writers, because more people reading is more people reading, and that means more eyes on books, more books in people's hands. That's good for all of us. Right.
And my last question for you is, what keeps you going when it gets tough? Because it's not always easy to write, or do you find it easy to write all the time?
Again, some days yes, some days no.
Yeah.
I guess that I'm lucky that I have a really great support structure. I've got a lot of good family and friends who have all been behind me through the years and through the lean times as well as the good times. So there are plenty of people who, if I'm having a bad day, I can kind of step away from the keyboard and have a gripe about it, and they'll pat me on the shoulder and go, there, Jim, get back to work, And that's nice to have that support structure. I also have a lot of friends who are fellow writers, so we can kind of talk shop. That's really, really useful to have that kind of support structure as well. But I think in terms of what propels me forward, it's a mix of the best and worst of my emotions. I think I get angry about stuff. When I see something that I don't like, that kind of propels me to write something. Even if it's down to, I read a book that's not particularly well written, I get angry about it and go, okay, I'm going to write something because this piece of work isn't very good and I think I can do better. But I'm also driven by the positive feeling of it, which is the great energy you get from people when someone says, I read your book, I really enjoyed it. When someone feels they've been, when they've been moved by something that you've done, or when they've just been excited or thrilled by it, that is just the best thing ever.
Yeah. Well, final quick thought you'd like to leave our listeners with today.
Well, I would just like to say thank you very much for reading my books, and please keep on doing so.
All right. James Swallow, thank you so much for being with us. Really appreciate interesting talking with you.
My pleasure.
You can find out more about James and his work at jamesswallow.blogspot.co.uk, and he's also on Twitter at jmswallow. And the book again called Nomad. Well, thanks for being with us today. We really appreciate you spending this hour with us. If you have questions or feedback on the show, you can reach me at all the usual places. We're on Facebook at Conversations Live with Vicky St. Clair. I'm on Twitter at Vicky St. Clair. And, of course, you can find more than 600 podcasts. Each show is archived and put onto our website at conversationslive.net. And you can reach me at 800-495-7617 if you have comments or feedback on today's show. 1-800-495-7617. We'll see you next week. Until then, live well, live strong. Hi, this is Vicky St. Clair with Conversations Live, and it's that time of year again. It's the 2018 KKNW Listener Survey, and I have a big favor to ask of you because we want to improve programming on an ongoing basis. So could you please just go to 1150kknw.com and take a few moments of your time to fill out the survey. It really helps me as a host to hear what you like about our show and what kind of guests and topics you'd like to hear in the future. Same goes for KKNW. It helps KKNW provide better station programming. Now, to thank you for your time for filling out the survey, you'll also have a chance to win a round-trip passage on Victoria Clipper to Victoria, BC, plus a $100 gift certificate to Schwartz Brothers Restaurants. So go to 1150kknw.com for your chance to win and tell us what you really think.
Radio is very competitive. Shows soar in popularity and then flame out. Sometimes, however, a real connection is made with an audience, and success blooms year after year. For over a decade, Conversations Live with Vicky St. Clair has built a loyal following thanks to inspiring and stimulating conversation. Longevity, loyalty, exclusivity. Smart advertisers seek it out. With Vicky's valuable audience, the search is over. Discover the affordable, effective ways to advertise your business. Log on to conversationslive.net. That's conversationslive.net today.
The views expressed on this program are those of the host, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of KKNW, its management, or other advertisers. Contests are the responsibility of the host of this program and not KKNW. This is Alternative Talk 1150 AM, KKNW Seattle, and KNUC 98.9 HD3 Seattle.
Good afternoon, Eric Ryder here with you on Alternative Talk 1150 AM. As we head towards 1 o'clock, time for a quick look at our traffic. Well, 405 southbound, finding some congestion now around Northeast 44th, and 520 still dealing with an earlier incident westbound, just west of Evergreen Point Road. And so we are still seeing a little bit of slowing right around that accident. Now stay tuned to Alternative Talk 1150 AM. Coming up in the 1 o'clock hour, you're going to hear Artbeat Northwest at 1:30.
Mattis plans. Hurricane tour. I'm Mike Moss. President Trump told 60 Minutes he expects Secretary of Defense James Mattis will be leaving the administration. Correspondent Barbara Starr has more from the Pentagon.
We all remember the days of the president's very enthusiastic Mad Dog Mattis, and now, well, maybe he's a Democrat. Look, nobody knows what Secretary Mattis's partisan leanings are, but the real issue is, why is the president very publicly appearing to sour on him? They have disagreed in the past on issues, but Mattis very careful to be very loyal in public.
The president and first lady today have been touring communities hard hit by Hurricane Michael. Correspondent Clayton Neville.
The president and first lady visiting the hardest hit areas by Hurricane Michael in the Florida Panhandle, expected to visit with people affected by the storm and with FEMA officials. An area ravaged by high winds, trees left in homes, roadways still covered in debris. Looking for some hope with the president's visit.
The two will also be touring damaged communities in Georgia as well. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is traveling to Saudi Arabia to learn more about the suspected killing of Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi. More from correspondent Nick Robertson.
The gap between the two sides on this is very big. It's not getting smaller. Both sides are entrenching at the moment. International pressure on Saudi Arabia is mounting to allow a transparent and open investigation.
The president today suggested that Khashoggi may have been killed by rogue killers. Turkey has accused the Saudi government of being behind his killing. Sears and Kmart have filed for bankruptcy and will close 142 of their worst-performing stores. Only 700 Sears and Kmart stores are currently open. Liquidation sales begin in 2 weeks. On Wall Street, the Dow up 129, the S&P up 6. I'm Mike Moss.
Good afternoon, Eric Ryder here with you on Alternative Talk 1150 AM. Time now for a quick look at our weather outlook. Mostly clear skies expected tonight with a low around 47. Tuesday, we're going to start the morning with patchy fog, otherwise sunny with a high near 70 degrees. And looks like Wednesday, same story. Patchy fog in the morning, sunny afternoon, high near 71, low around 48. Thursday, mostly sunny.
The views expressed on this program are those of the host, guest, and callers and are not necessarily those of KKNW, its management, or other advertisers. This is Alternative Talk 1150.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Discoveries in Health. I'm your host, Chris McKay, and I'm really glad you're with me today because today we're going to be talking about an issue that affects each and every one of us, and that's stress. And believe it or not, whether it's job stress, financial stress, family stress, or even the little things that we're told not to stress about, any form of stress takes a serious physical toll on your body. But don't worry, because there is something you can do about your stress. And joining me today on the phone is Dr. Michael Pincus. And Dr. Pincus is going to talk about stress and give us some great information on things that we can do to reduce or even eliminate the negative effects that daily stress has on our bodies. For those of you that may not know Dr. Pincus, he is a nationally recognized authority on natural and alternative health. He's worked with top Hollywood celebrities, professional and Olympic athletes, and he continues to be involved in the latest research into today's top health concerns. And Dr. Pincus, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thanks, Chris. Great to be with you.
So let's get right into this whole stress issue. You know, stress is such a normal part of our daily routine these days, but why should we all be concerned about it? And more specifically, what's going on in our bodies and what are the warning signs that we should be looking for?
Well, you know, there's two ways to look at stress. One is what we call mental stress, and the other is how stress affects your body. As a doctor, I'm more interested in how it affects your body.
Sure.
So the way stress affects the body is this. When a person's under stress, the body transposes the stress into tension.
Okay.
And your muscles end up contracting. And everyone feels that in their upper back and neck. You feel the tightness.
Right.
As a doctor, I'm more concerned about the muscles that you don't feel, such as the muscles in the arteries.
Oh, okay.
That tighten up. And the muscles, the heart is a giant muscle.
Oh, right.
And the muscles in and around your digestive tract. Because these are the things that are resulting in heart disease, digestive difficulties. And I want to talk a little bit in your show today about nutrition because there are two nutrients that completely handle the body in terms of stress.
Okay.
Now, according to the research that I've been involved with, it's as simple as calcium and magnesium.
Calcium and magnesium.
Right.
Okay.
When you're deficient in calcium and magnesium, a lot of things can happen. Calcium, magnesium, for example, is needed in order to go to sleep at night. And how many people do you know they just don't sleep well? You wake up tired, your body hurts more. Pretty soon it starts to wear you down, and pretty soon you get sick, and you have a condition. When people are suffering from pain and osteoporosis and fibromyalgia and cramps in their legs and weird illnesses, so there's something wrong with this picture. And it has to do with not how much calcium someone's taking in their diet or how many calcium supplements or how many antacids you chew. It has to do with simple absorption. Is that calcium getting absorbed into your body?
With calcium being something to deal with stress, isn't calcium for building bones?
Well, yes, okay.
Yeah.
And it does build your teeth. But you see, 1% of the calcium actually circulates in your blood. So when that 1% starts to drop, it could affect your heart, your brain, your kidneys, your organs, and your body shuts down, it actually dies.
Wow.
And so 1% of the calcium always has to be in your system. And there's two sources of calcium. One is in the diet, and two is from the bones themselves.
The body will absorb it back from the bones if it needs it?
That's right.
I see.
And what you just discussed right now leads to one of the major causes of a condition that's affecting 25 million Americans right now, which is called osteoporosis.
Right.
Which is a weakening of the bone.
Now, and that's due to the body deriving the calcium from the bones instead of from nutrition?
Yep.
Okay.
And so what we have to do is we have to find a way to put calcium back in the diet. Now, you think that would be really easy.
Sure, just drink milk.
Just drink milk or, you know, eat a lot of green leafy vegetables and that sort of thing. But first of all, people don't do that.
Right.
And second of all, the quality of the calcium that comes from our diet has been decreasing in the last 50 years.
Really?
Yeah, because things like pasteurization, foods are irradiated, the calcium is leached from the soil, and people are taking medications that block it. So the actual calcium is not being absorbed in the body.
Okay.
And then you see people taking Tums and calcium supplements, you know, they buy at the health food store or drugstore.
Right.
But these calciums don't absorb in the body.
That's interesting.
For a couple of reasons. One, when you take let's say an antacid that has the calcium in it, like a Tums, First of all, calcium does not absorb in the body unless it's in an acidic environment. But see, what happens when you take a TUM? It's an antacid.
Oh, okay.
So even if you're getting calcium in the antacid itself, it's not being absorbed.
I see, because it has to be in an acid environment for it to be absorbed.
Exactly.
Okay.
Now, we have a product called the CalMax formula. My CalMax formula is natural, and the difference is that it's a powder. And what happens is you put in hot water, and you mix it up, and you drink it down. So it's in a liquid instead of a pill, and it absorbs into your system.
Wow. So that solves that problem then.
Well, yeah, because when calcium and magnesium are in a liquid state, it absorbs 10 times better than in any other state.
Wow, that's great. Matter of fact, yes, I'm reading the can right now. It says a fast-absorbing calcium and magnesium beverage powder.
Well, it comes down to absorption. One of the ways to tell if you're not absorbing calcium is take a look at what drugs you're taking. Are you on high blood pressure medication? Do you need something for your kidneys? Are you on pain medications? Do you need sleeping pills? If the calcium and especially the magnesium is being absorbed, you're not going to suffer from all these things. My CalMax formula does absorb incredibly in the body. The thing is that when you take my CalMax formula, it's not like, well, will I feel better? I have thousands of people writing me and say, Dr. Pincus, I can't believe it. 30 minutes after I took the CalMax, the pain in my wrist went away, or I was able to sleep for the first time in years. I mean, this is really amazing.
I want to take a moment here to let you listeners know that if you want to get a free book about calcium and magnesium and try Dr. Pincus's CalMax formula, there's a special toll-free number you can call. It's 1-800-827-1205. Now, CalMax is a unique blend of calcium and magnesium that gets absorbed into your bloodstream so you can replace those vital nutrients that your body burns up when you experience stress. And I want to let you know that Dr. Pincus has arranged a very special introductory offer. It's only available to you listeners. So when you call, be sure to mention this program and you'll get a risk-free trial of CalMax. Again, this is only available to you listeners and only if you call this toll-free number. It's 1-800-827-1205. So if you're feeling the symptoms of stress, the lack of sleep, the low energy, pain and stiffness in your muscles and joints, your body is telling you it's lacking the calcium and magnesium it needs to handle the effects of everyday stress. You know, if you're concerned maybe about bone health or osteoporosis, if you want to improve your heart health, your digestive health, and even reduce or eliminate the effects of stress, I encourage you, try the CalMax formula. All you have to do is pick up the phone and call 1-800-827-1205. And when you do call today, you're also going to get that free book. It's called The User's Guide to Calcium and Magnesium. And folks, this book is packed with vital information about why your calcium needs change with age. Calcium's role in cardiovascular health, osteoporosis, diabetes, depression, fatigue. It's all in this very informative book.
Oh, yeah, and Chris, listen, I'd like to do something very special for the listeners today, so I'm going to give away an extra free bottle of my CalMax formula to the first 100 callers.
Well, thank you for doing that, Dr. Pincus. I really appreciate it. Folks, this just keeps getting better and better. So you get to try CalMax absolutely risk-free, and if you're one of the first 100 callers, you're going to get an extra free bottle, plus you're going to get that free book. So the number to call is 1-800-827-1205. And remember, you have absolutely nothing to lose because you can try CalMax absolutely risk-free. So that number to call is 1-800-827-1205. I'll give it to you again. It's 1-800-827-1205. If you're just joining us, I've got Dr. Michael Pincus on the phone today, and we're talking about something that we're all too familiar with these days, and that's stress. And we're finding out about the damage that everyday stress can do to our bodies, the warning signs that we should be aware of, and what we can do to alleviate and even eliminate the effects of stress. And Dr. Pincus, you were talking earlier about calcium and magnesium and how we need these nutrients in our bodies to fight the effects of stress, and how your CalMax formula can help us in this battle against stress. I'd like to talk for a minute about how the magnesium factors in. I mean, I'm starting to understand about the calcium, but what does magnesium do?
Well, we're talking about stress, and we're talking about stress affects the body. And first of all, in order to function at all, your body needs magnesium. It's probably, of all the vitamins I could list, Magnesium is probably the most important vitamin on the planet right now.
I've not heard a whole lot about magnesium. I mean, why is magnesium so important?
There's over 325 biochemical reactions that magnesium is involved with. It's almost like a hormone.
Wow.
And, for example, with low levels of magnesium, your heart won't beat.
Ooh.
Very important factor in life.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, I would say so.
Yeah, in fact, let me just read a list of some of the conditions associated with magnesium deficiencies.
Okay.
You have attention deficit disorder, Alzheimer's, anxiety, asthma, autism, chronic fatigue syndrome, congestive heart disease, constipation, diabetes, fibromyalgia, high blood pressure, insomnia, migraine headaches, multiple sclerosis, muscle cramps, Parkinson's, osteoporosis, and the list just goes on and on and on.
And this is associated with a lack of magnesium in the body?
Simply a lack of magnesium.
Holy cow.
So it's nothing to really mess around with. Now what happens is this. You need the magnesium in your body in order for the calcium to be absorbed.
Oh, so it's a necessary thing in order to get the first component, which is calcium.
That's right.